Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer. Today we've got the top 6 best critical hit and posture break builds in Elden Ring for you. These are all hard hitting and meant to build up posture and take advantage of the increased critical hit damage post patch 1.10. Before we continue though, a quick shout out to ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN is the VPN I use and trust, and there's a discount link and 3 extra months free in the description below, so be sure to check that out. First up is the Executioner's Greataxe with Lion's Claw. Now you can add Glintblades to any of these builds for extra posture damage, but the reason we've got to talk about the Executioner's Greataxe is its critical multiplier. It has a critical multiplier of 115, which for a big weapon that scales well off of strength is huge, as when a break comes, you'll get massive damage on your crits. Yeah, this is a solid way to take advantage of the fact that you have a big weapon with a big bonus critical multiplier with the Executioner's Greataxe. For this setup, we have the Greataxe plus 25, heavy affinity with Lion's Claw. You throw in Glintblades for extra posture damage, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dagger Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Faith Tier for buffs, and the Stance Breaking Tier. Let's get into stats. For stats, this is actually going to be fairly straightforward. We're going to heavily invest in strength because we put it on heavy affinity where it scales with an A, so it's going to hit really hard. You're going to get good AR out of this, and again, you're going to get that extra critical multiplier that the Executioner's Greataxe has. It's a fantastic weapon for posture breaking and critical hits. Next up, we've got some spoilers as we took on the final boss who we beat up a bit. This actually ended up being a really fun clip. For this, we chose to use the Iron Ball and Heavy Affinity with Craigblade on them. Fist weapon charge attacks build up posture incredibly well while also doing great damage. Radagon gets beat up here pretty good as we're able to apply enough pressure to get a critical break. Craigblade will increase our posture damage even more and can make the Iron Ball fist weapons even more powerful. Yeah, if you're looking for a really powerful strength weapon and you're into fist weapons and you think, there's something that you want to use and put in heavy affinity, the Iron Ball is definitely something that's going to give you a substantial amount of damage. You can beat up bosses, you can build up consistent poise damage with the charge attacks while taking literally chunks of HP off. They're fantastic for posture breaking. And granted, Elden Beast is always going to be a longer fight than Radagon because Radagon is a glass cannon build first and foremost, but if you combine jump attacks, charge attacks, you can take care of Radagon really quickly, get rid of him, and move on to Elden Beast, the bigger and more lengthy boss fight. Now, in terms of Elden Beast, as we just mentioned, he's definitely another story. We do get our chance to beat him up here for sure while doing substantial damage and heavy affinity. I actually tried this on Flame Art first. It wasn't too good on Flame Art. I used Radagon and Elden Beast as kind of a test dummy and ended up going for heavy affinity, which ended up being a lot of damage. The main thing here is going to be applying pressure with the charge attacks because that's paramount to getting a break. That's what's going to end up building up a critical break, and then we can take advantage of that and get even more damage post patch 1.10. Now, Elden Beast is going to run away more often than not. Keep that in mind. Posture resets entirely after 6 seconds, so staying close to him is ideal. Eventually, he's going to go up and he's going to do the rings, and when he's at that point, you'll have a brief moment to rebuff. However, all of your posture damage and buildup will reset during this time. When he comes back down, now is the time to hit him with charge attacks and jump attacks in combination as much as you can to build up posture. The ideal scenario here is to get a break during or before Elden Stars to build up posture so that you can break him around that time, because that can make the latter half of the fight significantly easier and may help you avoid some of its damage. It is a little bit annoying to deal with as far as Elden Stars, but if you get a break around the right time, you can make the second half of the fight substantially easier. Now, because I'm building up posture at the time that I wanted to build up posture, it ends up working out. I end up getting a break right around Elden Stars. Generally, if you can get it before it, you can make the end of the fight really easy, but I ended up getting it during that. But it's not going to matter much because we're going to get some invulnerability when we take our critical hit here. There's not going to be much left of Elden Stars, and the final half of this fight, the final third of this fight, is going to be easier. Continue to do chunk damage to him and he'll go down in no time. You may have to run him down towards the end again, obviously, because he's going to continue what he normally does and runs away very frequently, which can be annoying, but as long as you catch up with him, do charge attacks, continue to build up pressure on him, you'll make your life a lot easier and beat him rather quickly. He does have the second rings that you'll have to deal with as well, but they're really easy. Just jump over them and then avoid his long-range attacks. Sometimes he'll end up spamming the blades at you at the same time as the rings are there. If that happens, Be really careful and wary of that. That's something that can take you out of the fight rather quickly, so pay attention during the rings, as he may consistently spam you more during that time period. Keep in mind the Iron Ball and some of the other fist weapons do a crazy amount of posture damage on the charge attacks. Even without a bigger crit multiplier, you're going to get breaks fairly frequently. Also keep in mind this is New Game Plus 7, max scaling, and by then enemy posture is roughly 30% more. Yeah, each New Game Plus will add enemy HP and it will add the damage they do to you, but it will also add the amount of posture they have as well. I think by the time you get to New Game Plus 7, it's going to be around 30% more, which ends up being a substantial difference. If you do the math, Elden Beast will have around 200 posture on New Game Plus 7. And we took him down fairly easily. That wasn't an overly tough fight. We only had to heal a couple of times. It wasn't too bad. We're going to go over stats, equipment, everything you need to know for this awesome Iron Ball build. For equipment, we have the Iron Ball and Heavy Affinity with Greatblade on it. We have the Raptor's Black Feathers, any seal will do, Claw Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Axe Talisman, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, and then we have the Faith tier for buffs, and then the Charge tier to boost us even further. Let's get into stats. For stats, the same as the first build we did. Not all the builds here are the same, but these two are as far as the Executioner's Greataxe and the Iron Ball. You can do both these builds because we pump strength up to 80 for massive damage from the Iron Ball charged attacks, and the stats for this is going to give you a lot of damage. This is a really solid build and set up for posture breaks. Next, we're going to be moving on to Mog or however you say it, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a change up with Impaling Thrust. We're going to be doing a Blood Impaling Thrust, which, by the way, Impaling Thrust itself, 35 or more, relatively around 35 posture damage, which is really good. It's a great way to build up posture and get in your critical hits. I elected to use this with the Nagakiba and Occult Affinity to add some bleed as well as solid damage to the weapon that has innate bleed on it. If you apply pressure with Impaling Thrust, you're bound to get breaks and can often make life easier for you by continuing to use its relatively quick and long-reaching animation. I did manage to get a break here in Phase 1. I ended up missing on the break that I got during Phase 1, but don't worry, as we get another one in Phase 2 of the fight. Phase 2 can be a very difficult part. We'll show that obviously here, and I'll show a little bit of a strategy on how to handle it. And now with Jump Attack Bleed builds, you're probably never going to see Phase 2 here. You're probably going to end up destroying before he ever even gets to that point, but for us here, we're going to have to deal with it with Impaling Thrust and Blood Affinity, or Occult Affinity rather. We're going to continue to apply pressure and stance damage, because if we do get a critical break at that point, we're going to slow down the fight substantially, and then at that point, it's going to go in our favor. That's the main thing here. Impaling Thrust does great in terms of being able to posture break, so applying it with the Nagakiba over and over again, you are going to get those breaks. Again, New Game Plus 7 is going to be a little bit harder, but there's our second break during this fight, and we're able to finish off Mog with a critical hit. Very, very easy to do with Impaling Thrust. And down goes another tough boss. Well, another tough boss if you're not doing Jump Attack Bleed builds. If you are doing Jump Attack Bleed builds, as I mentioned, you probably will never see Phase 2, so there's the advantage there. But if you're looking for a posture breaking build, Impaling Thrust with Occult Affinity is also a solid option. Yeah, I wanted to do a little bit of a change up for Impaling Thrust. Normally it'd be a Keen Affinity, but for this we had the Occult Nagakiba, Dragon Communion Seal, because it scales with Arcane, so why not? White Mask, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Dagger Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Faith tier for buffs, and then we have the Health Restore tier. Let's get into stats. Now for stats, since we're on Occult here, we have Arcane at 60, and then we have the stats we need for the Nagakiba, and you're going to get really good AR out of this while obviously having the innate bleed scale with the Occult Affinity as well, making for a solid Impaling Thrust build that does posture damage and a little bit of bleed as well. It's a change up from the Keen Affinity one you would do. In that case, you would go all Dexterity, and you can get a lot of damage on the Nagakiba or the starting Katana going that way too if you choose to do so. I just did a little bit of a variant on the Impaling Thrust build. Square Off has become a favorite for me for posture breaks, and the Noble Slender Sword has the most reach of any straight sword in the game while also having a 110 critical hit multiplier. I elected to take on the Dragons and Kaled and use Flame Art Affinity. With this setup and Flame Art Affinity, you can actually use any incantations you like to use while rocking high faith and good fire damage and AR from the Noble Slender Sword. This is because the Noble Slender Sword gets a B in Flame Art, so it scales well with your faith stat and a little bit of dexterity with a D as well. If you're looking for pure damage on square off, you would go for keen affinity and go high dexterity, but me personally, I enjoy turning any of my builds into Faith builds because I love the variety that Faith has in Elden Ring. There's a lot you can do with the incantations combined with flame art weapons. By the way, if you're following to this point and you're not subbed, definitely hit that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss out on all the awesome Elden Ring content we've been doing on this channel, and hopefully covering upcoming Armor Core 6 if that ends up being good too. Definitely hit that subscribe button. By the way, if you're noticing for square off, I actually free aim it. I know some people have difficulty with the Ash of War. It does 40 posture damage on each hit with square off, so that's a pretty good amount and can posture break most of the bosses in the game fairly easily. I recommend free aiming it though, rather than having the lock-on aim, as you end up missing more often. Yeah, in the case of free aiming, you're just going to hit with this more often than not, and then you're going to end up getting those critical breaks, and then you have that 110 multiplayer, which isn't bad on the Noble Slender Sword, and the Noble Slender Sword, as I mentioned, has the longest reach of the straight swords do, so it can be a little bit convenient for you when you're taking out enemies using square off. Yeah, this can actually be combined. You saw a previous video probably that I did on my channel with Glintblades to do a total of 80 posture damage when you go into a fight. If you activate the Glintblades at the same time you use the charge square off, it's awesome. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we did a change up here, obviously, with Flame Art, Noble Slender Sword, and Square Off. We had 51 poise, I think, in all these builds. Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Dagger Talisman, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, the Faith tier, and the Fire tier for more damage. Let's get into stats. For stats, this is really easy as far as this build goes. You're just going to heavily invest in Faith. You can do all your favorite incantations, mix it up however you like, and then you get good damage in AR on the Noble Slender Sword with that B in its Faith scaling for the Flame Art affinity. It's an awesome build all around with a lot of variety. Glintblade Phalanx was next, and I did this on my Mage character as a Mage build. They scale with intelligence mainly on the Ash of War, I think pretty much all intelligence, and do a total of 40 posture damage, 10 on each one. You can use the Misery Corde for 140 crit multiplier, or any good Rapier to get at least 110. I elected to use Rozier's Rapier and decided to buff this up a fair bit for fun. The God's Kid Noble would ultimately go down fairly fast after the Sleeping Pot, as I was able to do a solid amount of damage and posture damage with Glintblade Phalanx and its follow-up right trigger attack. And don't forget, by the way, this can be boosted by Terra Magica, and also do not forget that you have that follow-up attack after you activate the Glintblade, so you can do a little bit of extra posture damage and damage in general with that follow-up attack. Use the Glintblades to get your posture breaks and get substantial critical damage out of the Rapier as well. This is a really fun build that you can run as a mage to get a lot of posture build up and get good critical hits. And again, you can use the Misery Corde and get really good damage if you want to run a dagger build with that 140 crit, or you can use something like Rozier's Rapier, get 110 and get a good amount of damage with a nice moveset. Yeah, this is a good combination build for a mage. It's something you can include and do all your spells that you like too. Let's get into equipment. We have Rozier's Rapier and Magic Affinity with Glintblade Phalanx. We have the Spellblade set, which will boost this by 8%, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Magic tier, and then add the Steadily Restoring HP tier. Let's get into stats. First stats, this is the stats for my level 200 mage. Obviously, I have a good amount of faith investment, 80 intelligence, we're doing a lot of damage. I'm going to show the 150 stats as well, but if you're a really high level character, it scales mainly off intelligence. Now, for 150, you're going to go for 60 intelligence, 23 faith gets you to 33 with the faith tier, you do all the buffs you like, and 60 vigor. Lastly is Giant Hunt. I chose to use the Swordspear for this, and Giant Hunt does around the same posture damage as Lion's Claw. The Guardian Swordspear has ridiculous base damage and scales amazingly in keen affinity as one of the best pure dexterity weapons in the game. Combined with the fact that you can use Giant Hunt on this awesome weapon, you'll be beating up bosses easily with the Swordspear and Ash combo. You can easily get your critical hits, get substantial damage from it, and the keen affinity base damage scaling on this is amazing. Yeah, the Guardian Swordspear is becoming one of my favorite weapons in Elden Ring, given how good it is on keen affinity. It really is good. We have it on keen affinity with Giant Hunt, any seal will do, Raptor's Black Feathers, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dagger Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. Then we have the Stance Breaking tier, the Faith tier for buffs. Let's get into stats. For stats, this is definitely a dexterity build. Pump up dexterity as much as you can, get it to 70 or 80, 60 vigor. You're going to get a substantial amount of damage. Take advantage of how good Giant Hunt is. I have an extra clip I'm actually going to show in this video on how good Giant Hunt could be with the Guardian Swordspear. To get into the next clip, these are awesome stats for it. This is the extra clip I added in for a little bit of information on Giant Hunt. You see, Giant Hunt can consistently interrupt enemies that have lower poise. The duo boss fight here is going to be a perfect example of this. If you continue to use Giant Hunt on lower poise enemies, they'll have almost every attack interrupted, and it can make certain fights like the Crucible Knights, which can normally be challenging, a lot easier. Even though I died once to these two when I was testing weapons, the second try I was able to time everything better and interrupt basically everything they were trying to do. I wasn't even aware how useful this could actually be against the sometimes intimidating Crucible Knights. The Crucible Knights can actually be a challenge for many people given their move sets and the fact that a lot of times when they go to hit you, their reach looks like it's going to be a lot shorter than it ends up being, and then they end up hitting you anyway. For Giant Hunt, though I do take a couple of hits here, you can consistently interrupt his attacks. So basically keep pressuring him, and every time you use Giant Hunt, whatever attack he's going to try to use on you, even there when he tries to change in and end up using his wings, you can interrupt that too. You can continue to interrupt him with Giant Hunt, basically stop him from doing most of the frustrating attacks that the Crucible Knights could do. So I threw this clip in if you're struggling. By the way, everything's timestamped as always in the description below. Be sure to always check out my descriptions because I put a lot of information in there if you need anything extra. Generally speaking, there's a lot of info in there, and again, they'll be all timestamped too, so you can go to each individual build if you want to try any of these out for awesome critical hit damage and posture breaks. Thanks for watching this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this updated list for patch 1.10 on the best posture breaking and critical hit builds in Elden Ring, at least for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you're not subbed, definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button. The Discord's in the link below. Be sure to join that too, and I'll catch you guys at my channel. Thanks for watching.